are you spending too much time on Twitter waiting for cool code? Like that was the original launch post. Within the first week, we had like 10 founders using it for 14 hours a day.
Really?
And we're like, this is more traction than the thing we just built for 4 years. It's kind of like startup university. It's getting beaten up over again.
I'm joined today by Louis from Vibe Kanban. In this episode, we talk about why everyone's wrong on AI pull requests, why Louis walked away from 6-figure deals, and do we even need software developers? Enjoy the episode.
I think like one of the rules we've got at Vibe Kanban is like, don't build anything that the Claude Code team is probably going to build in the next 3 months. Because like, I think if you take a 12-month view, you could arrive at the conclusion like almost everything is going to get built by this team. But if you take a 3-month view, you're like, okay, well, there's so many other things that are obviously higher priority, and you can just kind of see the direction of where the product's moving. And then if you put everything through the kind of filter of like, does it pass or fail the 12-month test, everything fails. And then you're like, well, we can't build anything. We may as well go and become carpenters or something.
Yeah.
So maybe that's helpful framing.
So you think of it like they're not going to build it imminently.
Yes. Yeah. Everything is going to get built at some point by the AI labs is like, that may or may not be true. But if you just accept that and look at the kind of competitive landscape more as like, there is a sweet spot of things where it's a good idea, and therefore that means it's probably on the lab's roadmap, but it's not an immediate thing that they would work on. I think that's kind of the intersection.
Yeah. I mean, like Lovable, I think is the obvious one. I think at the time, everyone was like, they're just going to build this way. This is a fad. Like, why haven't they? Do you think? Do you have an insight into?
I mean, I don't know if the answer is a product answer, because when you look at ChatGPT now, you can go on, you can say, make me a website, and they've got a button that says preview, and you can see a website, and I can even send a link, to anyone with my preview, and it's like a working website, right? But people still choose to use Lovable, and there are some product things like you can't buy a domain through ChatGPT yet. Maybe they'll add that, who knows how soon. But I don't know. I think a lot of this comes down to you as a founder versus product manager number 50 at a big AI company. And you see it time and time again, especially when it comes to distribution, this kind of founder-led, I'm going to post on Twitter, and, like, what's the kind of OpenAI equivalent of that? They're promoting their kind of core product. They can't do the founder-led marketing for 50 products at once, can they? So I think it's a combination of focus and just how distribution works in the current environment.
Yeah, I guess if we thought of it of like, why wouldn't Google build this? It feels like there's an obvious answer, but maybe we're holding, or at least I'm like kind of holding them in this kind of mythical place where it's like they can do anything, and I don't know.
Yeah. You're holding OpenAI.
Yeah. And the kind of a lot of the other labs, maybe not. I don't know. Because it feels like they were on a roll. Maybe it's less now, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess what are they most interested in as well? Maybe we live in a massive bubble, and these companies really focus on what does AI look like for the billions of people, not just the kind of actually quite small minority of people that want to build a website, right? And so the Sora app is like a good example of this bet. I don't know how many Americans have TikTok, but probably like 100 million people have TikTok, right? And that's a bet that they're much more, if they can win that, I guess that's just got the potential to be a much bigger thing than whatever their equivalent of a Lovable clone would be, right? So maybe that's another way to look at it. And they're also kind of unencumbered. Like, it doesn't matter to a big company with existing distribution like OpenAI whether they get there first. in the way that it does as a startup. Like as a startup, you can't come from behind and win. You have to be early on something because you're betting that you can kind of get distribution, get to escape velocity before the incumbents kind of take over. Apple's a great example of this, right? Weren't first to the smartphone, weren't first to, well, certainly not first to AI, but as soon as they roll out Gemini and Siri, like that's going to be the way that most people use AI suddenly, right? Because they've already got the distribution. So it's not, I don't think OpenAI is sitting there thinking like, damn, we missed Lovable. I think they're not actually, it doesn't matter whether they ship it this year or next year to them, right? Because they've got the distribution.
Then they can come from behind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. You could spend ages tearing your hair out building these things yourself, or you could use WorkOS. Will, what do you guys do?
My name is Will Stewart, co-founder and CEO of Northflank. We're a self-service developer platform, and we help teams deploy their most critical workloads into their VPC.
And you guys use WorkOS?
We use WorkOS for our SAML and OIDC integrations. It's a pretty exceptional product. It makes everything regarding authentication pretty seamless, and it's been instrumental for us to onboard our enterprise customers much faster. Building integrations with lots of different SAML providers is really challenging. We can do that for cloud providers. That's our job. But we don't want to do that for the other type of IDP. This is quite interesting because internal developer portal, platform, and then there's the identity provider. So IDP has 3 different meanings, and we're internal developer platform, and WorkOS is IDP for authentication. But yeah, it's a great product.
Thanks, WorkOS. Back to the episode. Okay, speaking of the value of being early. So when we first met, you were working on Bloop.
Yes.
And I think you were very early.
Yes, too early.
Okay, so talk to us about the stages of earliness, because I feel like maybe Vibe Kanban was like the right level of early.
Yeah. Well, I think all the things we did before Vibe Kanban just meant that when we started working on Vibe Kanban, it was really early because we had just been immersed in the bubble because of all the stuff we'd built before. So I guess just to recap, started the company in 2021, training small embedding models to do code search. And this is in a world before GitHub Copilot had been released, before GPT-3, or maybe GPT-3 had just come out, and certainly pre-ChatGPT, Claude Code, all of that. So we had to adapt very quickly when the GPT-3 Turbo came out and ChatGPT moment happened, and we started moving up to the kind of application layer and just building software on top of other people's models. So we were no longer training our own or fine-tuning our own embedding models. And then we moved into services for a bit. So we were doing legacy code modernization for a year. And at some point that wasn't really working. We just saw the sales cycles were going to kill us relative to how much runway we had and the milestone that we would need to meet to kind of get funded and raise the next round. So we were looking for a new opportunity to work on, and that's when Claude Code came out. And we thought, okay, well, clearly this is going to be a big shift. And all the big companies in the space that have already got a foothold have ridden a big shift. You look at Cursor, it was the first to kind of implement that concept. Same with Devon, same with Lovable, and probably many outside of the coding space as well, basically cemented their lead by just being first and executing really well. And it was just a kind of overnight decision to just build something that we'd been playing around with internally, which became Vibe Kanban. So we saw that there were a bunch of problems with just how you use Claude Code. Like if you want to run 2 of them, you have to open 2 terminals, and that just doesn't feel like the future of coding. And you very quickly find that your bottleneck when you're working with coding agents is your ability to cognitively balance review and planning. And so how do I kind of create an interface that makes it intuitive, that I should be reviewing something that AI has just worked on, rather than me looking at kind of green text on a black background terminal, trying to remember like, okay, well, what is this doing? Having to run some commands. It's like, let's try and remove the cognitive burden and just surface, okay, AI's done some work. Human, you just QA this or look at the code or whatever. And so we launched it to the YC community. And within the first week, we had like 10 founders using it for 14 hours a day.
Really?
And we're like, wow, this is like more traction than the thing we just built for
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah.
God. And I guess that gave us the confidence to like double down. And then we cleaned it up a bit, released the open source version. And we're now approaching, I think we'll hit 20,000 stars today, actually.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
which is cool.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's very different as well. Just maybe very quickly on the community thing, because we had an open source community around the first product that we released, which was the code search engine. But, had a lot of stars, had decent downloads, but was not that interactive. Like people weren't contributing and they weren't logging into the Discord. We had like 100 people in the Discord, and now we've got thousands of people in the Vibe Kanban Discord. It's like night and day. It's like catching a fish. You always think you've caught a fish, but when you do catch a fish, there is no doubt in your mind that you have caught a fish.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like that with the community with Vibe Kanban. Like it feels so different to everything else we've done previously. That yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah. There's this is the cringiest thing I'll ever do on this podcast, but there's a Lana Del Rey song. God.
You're gonna sing it.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the lyrics is like, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
If you have to ask, the answer is no.
There you
or
go.
something. And it's like
It is a bit like that. Yeah. I don't have to ask.
Yeah. So I feel like this is one of the things that like in a minor way I felt this for a few different things, and I've had so many other things where it's just like no one gave a damn. And I think there is that huge difference between like stars, people liking it, people going, oh, this is cool, but like versus like people spending 14 hours a day. It's
100%. I guess it's a tool that you use. It's such a core part of your workflow. It like is in the same category of things as your IDE, right? And so if something pisses you off, you're going to want to change it, and you're gonna, and so the ability to just make that change, especially with Claude Code and all the other coding CLIs. Now, we have loads of people opening small changes that are just like quality of life improvements, things like that. And so I think it is important that, we have that like really close feedback loop with the people using the tool for this type of product. Because if you're using something for 14 hours a day and like something's pissing you off, you're going to churn. So I think this lends itself quite well to that model.
Is it kind of fairly obvious what you spend your time on versus, I would imagine before it's like, how do we market this? How do we get people?
Yeah. Like what is your question? Like what are the steps?
Well, I guess the question is like, is it once you find it, is it like relatively straightforward to just know what to do, what to work on, and just hard work versus that's what I would imagine it's like. Is that fair? Or
I think the roadmap is kind of clear. So maybe we can look at this in a few ways. Like one is what do we build? And I would say the backlog has been pretty consistent for the last few months, and we've been just working on that. And it's a question of how do we build it faster? How do we hire the right people? At the same time, there are some forks in the road, especially around how far do we go down code review, things like that, in a world where that's obviously like an incredibly competitive landscape, and there's lots of people who want to kill GitHub, and then GitHub wants to like improve their thing, and and then on the other end of that, there's how deeply do we want to integrate with like existing project management tools? How much do we want to build up into that and kind of become a competitor in that space? So I guess, there are some decisions, but it's not fundamental like product market fit questions. I guess it's more resource allocation at the end of the day for us. And then in terms of marketing, like something we're very keen to do is get teams using the product more. So we currently have a bunch of people working in companies where they have like a team within a larger company and everybody uses Vibe Kanban on the team, but we don't really have great Teams support yet. So I can't see what your Claude code does. You can't see what mine does, etc. But that's going to change. Maybe by the time this comes out, like we actually will have shipped that. It's kind of dropping imminently. So that's the kind of the big unlock is once we release version 1 of that, be a bunch of new marketing that we have to do because everything else has been this product-led growth stuff. And then suddenly we're selling to teams, and so it's back maybe hitting up the phones. I mean, I think the foundation of all of the marketing will always be the open source, people adopting it as an individual and then hopefully spreading that within their team. But this is something that we might experiment with, is like just jumping on a flight to San Francisco and sitting down with a laptop in a bunch of people's offices and just showing them what the product is and what it can do for their team.
Yeah, and is it like, are you seeing it that it's devs and will always be devs that you're building for?
Yeah.
Or is it? Yeah.
I think there's so much to build for that space. I think this is one of the failures of other tools in the space, is that they are too broad. And the workflow, if all human skilled work becomes basically plan and review work that has been done by AI, then that's very domain specific, right? Like the way you review code is very different from the way you review architectural designs or whatever. And the speed at which you can perform that job as a human is going to be completely bottlenecked by how solid the experience is, and how tailored it is. So yeah, I'm very bullish on profession specific orchestration tools. I don't buy that there's going to be one general kind of suite of tool that wraps AI for all professions.
Okay. And you're thinking that devs will continue to be needed and okay, the big question.
This feels like rage bait.
No, go on.
We are so far away from a world in which AI is able to like plan its own work. So, there are some interesting startups where they take, they add a feedback form to a website and then they spin up Claude code in the background to like deliver what people type into the feedback box or whatever. But we're so far away from that being useful that you definitely need somebody with a product mindset to kind of like take these inputs, which are like user feedbacks, and pass them into outputs, which are actual tasks. The two are not the same thing, right? You can't just automatically turn every user request into a task. That's one end. The other end is the review. And, there was some invisible threshold that was crossed, maybe with like GPT-5 and Opus 4.5, where everybody suddenly realized these things are more than 50% reliable. But there's a big difference between these things being reliable enough that humans don't need to be in the loop reviewing things. And it's like a 99% problem. You can't take humans out of the loop of reviewing software for a neobank or like the average business. If you have 90% accuracy, you need 100% accuracy. So I think software engineers are going to be very relevant and people are going to be building more. And so we'll just need more software developers. I don't know how you kind of solve the short-term lack of usefulness of junior devs. Like it seems very obvious if everybody's just reviewing code, then you need experts who know how to review code in the driving seat of this stuff. And that's the real problem with junior developers, is like they're just not able to, they maybe don't command enough experience to be able to give companies the trust that they want to hire those roles right now. But I think it'll come back, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to be building more software. We're going to need to review more, and then we're going to need to onboard more devs to the industry. So I think we're in a weird in-between phase before that kicks in.
Yeah. And how do you think it's changed the way that devs work with Vibe Kanban versus like, say, in the properly old days, and then also even just when people are using like one Claude code instance and just
the properly old days being what, like 2021?
Yeah, we could say we could think of it from that, I suppose. Or maybe we could just start from everyone knows what it's like. And
I guess one of the things that is interesting, especially with having like a big Discord community, is there's no common way. Like you ask me, how has it changed? And the reality is everybody's doing different things. There's not one way. The way I advocate for, because this is just how I found my own work to be quite productive. You can imagine it's like full stack, Rust on the back end, TypeScript, React on the front end. So I think this workflow kind of works fine for both of those things, is to parallelize your work as much as possible and try and get the AI to work for as long as possible before it needs to yield back to a human. So if you look at the brief history of like AI assisted coding, you have GitHub Copilot, which takes a few seconds and gives you a line of code back. Then you have Cursor, which can complete a paragraph in 2023. Obviously, you can do a lot more now, but just talking through the timeline. Then you have Claude Code eventually, which can do multiple files at once, read them, edit them, and then also it can run scripts. So it's starting to run the type checker and other scripts. And what is the direction of travel? Well, it's like you've gone from a few seconds waiting to do something as a human after AI has done its work to now having to wait a few minutes. And, this year I expect AI is going to be able to like reliably start a dev server, probably open a browser, click around on some stuff, test the change a bit more thoroughly. Probably not all the way, but, first pass, second pass of the testing, I expect will be there. And then you're into like 10-minute, 20-minute, maybe hour-long territory before you as a human actually need to kind of take back control and do whatever your task is, which is probably review something. So I'm looking slightly to like, with that framework in mind, I'm like, okay, how can we prepare ourselves for that world? It's like, okay, the current capability almost works well enough with tasks that can run for 5 or 10 minutes. But I think really, I guess the workflow that I advocate for is something that I expect to become the default once these things are running for a slightly longer period of time. Then there's all the other weird stuff like, Ralph loops and stuff like that, and people using, like agents that command other agents that sort of break things down. And to be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time really looking at that in too much detail because I think we're so guided by just what are the majority of our users doing. They're basically using Claude Code as it's shipped in the CLI, and to kind of focus on, I guess, the minority of users would be to maybe build a subpar experience for the majority of our users. So.
Yeah. For instance, I was experimenting with ChatGPT Pro, and that definitely has like a 20-minute sometimes timing. Like, how are people actually, this is maybe very tactical, but how are people not getting very distracted? And I find it very hard to just like rifle off a really long task, which I have no idea how long it's going to take. And then I often just basically wait and just mess around
Yeah.
to be
You're
frank.
on Twitter.
Kind of, yeah. Sorry, Damon. Yeah. But you kind of go off and you do something else. And sometimes what has helped me is like having like the sound effects like in the terminal and stuff. So you get like a little ping when it's done. But like,
that was the original launch of Vibe Kanban, I think, was,
really?
Are you spending too much time on Twitter waiting for Claude Code? That was the original launch post back in like June 2025. And I think the very first feature we added was a cow mooing at the end of each execution run so that you would remember, so that you would know to like get off, whatever it is you're doing, go
Time's
back
up.
in. And we tried lots of sound effects, and everybody sort of, every sound effect faded into the background except for the cow mooing.
Really?
And
Okay.
a rooster crow.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there are loads of things that people can be doing while they wait for AI to do its thing. The obvious thing is like, think through, when this is done, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
And so that's what we talk about when we talk about planning is AI generally is as good as the input you give it a lot of the time. So if you can be organized and write down like a really detailed spec, you're going to get better results. And so, kind of guiding the human to do that. Okay, you've just started something. Now let's go and write another ticket. That creating a workflow around that just means that, you're less likely to end up wasting time looking at the logs or on Twitter, whatever. Review is obviously the other one. So, I've probably got 4 or 5 instances of coding agents on the go at any given time. They're not running for 20 minutes. They're probably running for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. And one of them finishes, I'm starting a dev server, I'm testing the change. If the QA goes well, I then move on to the code changes, and I do an AI review now, and then I do a human review of that. And there's always things you can be doing. There was kind of really interesting experiment that somebody took the database that Vibe Kanban uses under the hood and created a visualization, almost like a calendar of all of the different things that you're working on. So create a calendar event to say Claude Code was running on this task here. And you can see if you've got 4 things in parallel that you've got all these different calendar events overlapping as you kind of go back and forth. And it's quite easy to keep yourself busy if you just accept that you have to run more than one thing in parallel. If you just run one thing in parallel, you're going to end up on Twitter.
Yeah. Okay, this is great, actually. So Vibe Kanban, 20,000 GitHub stars, as you said, massively popular there. How have you found the kind of open source versus SaaS kind of play?
Yeah. We just want to build a great tool. I know this sounds cheesy, but honestly, it's just, there is only one thing that is important, and that is figuring out what is useful. And so the more feedback we can collect, the more we can enable people to open PRs and make changes, the faster we'll achieve that. And as a small company in this little tech outpost called London, you got to look for these, I guess, unfair advantages that, we otherwise might not need if we were based somewhere like the faucet of AI culture, San Francisco. And so, it just gives us a huge leg up. And we obviously do have a SaaS version in the works that will probably be out by the time this is published. But it's just a hosted version of the open source product, because the philosophy is the same. It's okay, well, people should be able to improve that as well. There's no reason why the Teams version of this, won't be something that people spend 14 hours a day like they do in the individual version of this. And so there's going to be things that they want to change, and we want to be able to solicit that feedback in the easiest way possible, which is be open source.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen a lot of people talking about with open source projects recently is AI pull requests. How have you had this?
No,
issue?
it's
No.
great.
Yeah.
It's great. It's somebody took the time to tell Claude to do something, and then spent some money on tokens to create a pull request. I mean, it's almost the new bar for what I would consider a serious complaint or product request is a kind of half-baked PR. And I'd say more than half of the things that we ship from the community, we take the kind of the AI slop version, and then we just clean it up and we take it over. And sometimes maybe 50% of the code survives, sometimes maybe less, but it is so much better than just, seeing people on, who just complain on Discord. And I guess the difference is when people use Claude to try and make the PR, it also means they're able to test the change. And so there's often some refinement, or they don't even open it because they ask Claude to make the change. They test the change, they realize, oh, this is bollocks, versus having some sort of weird academic conversation on GitHub discussions or Discord. It's just it's such a better filter than that, to just be able to build the feature and discuss that.
Okay. Why do you think this is a different view to what a lot of other people have been saying?
I don't know, other people are wrong. It's very simple, isn't it? A failure of them to be organized enough to deal with their community. I mean, hyper growth is tough, right? Some of the, we're at a scale where we have over 100 open pull requests, which I wish was smaller, but some of these projects are growing much faster than that, and they've got thousands. But you have to allocate resources to fixing those things. Otherwise, You have this. You have to balance solving the urgent and the important things, and not everything urgent is important. But if something is really annoying somebody and they're using your tool 14 hours a day, like, you want to get that patched, even if it's not strategically useful to you. So we try and balance doing a mix of both of those.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have there been any other things in terms of open source that like you'd be saying to other people who've been doing it for a while now, like managing an open source community?
Yeah, well, I guess the only interesting thing I could possibly say is, having had the original projects that we worked on pre-pivot open source and the ones that we work on now post-pivot, like, I guess just trying to just get as many channels as possible to understand what people actually want. So we got a feedback box in the app. We got GitHub pull requests. We got GitHub issues. We got GitHub discussions. We've got Discord. I regularly email users to just solicit feedback. We post on Reddit and religiously read the comments. And if people see that you're actually responding to the stuff, and you just, half the time somebody sends in a problem and I just reply with the pull request, and then they can watch it get merged and get released. You actually need to kind of go out there. It's not enough to just be building SaaS and then accidentally make your GitHub repo open instead of closed and then call that open source. You'll get stars, but you won't get a community. So you need to be, I guess it's the breadth of channels and the responsiveness that I think it separates this project from what we worked on previously that kind of may have looked like open source but didn't feel like a real community.
So you weren't proactive in the previous?
No, it was like source available.
Okay.
I don't think we had that many people opening PRs. We weren't really encouraging people to open PRs. I don't think we had a Discord for most of the life of the first project. We definitely didn't have Discord discussions on GitHub, and we weren't really going out there and soliciting feedback in that way.
Why do you think you didn't do that? It just didn't occur to you, or was it like a strategic?
Young founders,
Okay.
Yeah. I feel genuinely I would explain the last 5 years of my life as kind of like startup university. It's getting beaten up over again.
Yeah.
But you know what? We're tougher now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The payoff is
Yeah. I know.
is here.
Yeah. Well, kind of on beating up, on taking beatings. Well, the last episode we did was on modernizing legacy code. And it made a lot of sense to me. It was like, this sounds great. What do you think what were the challenges there? Like, why are you not still doing that, I guess, is the...
Well, I would say a couple of things. One of the easy things to admit is that I don't really like selling to banks as a person, to be honest. I think I tried it, and there are I've been in the room with people that are really good at this, and I actually think it's like something that I just don't really particularly enjoy. There's with Vibe Kanban, we're going much further, I guess, leaning into selling to the types of people that we are, who are driven by technology and excitement about that, rather than risk. And it's a much more involved process to kind of persuade a big bank that you want to convert all their COBOL to Java. Is much more than just the technology. And it's a skill. I respect people that can do that, but it's a skill that we would have had to spend much more time learning how to do. And at the end of the day, small startup, limited runway, looking at 1.5 year to 2 years sales cycles. We could have stayed in the game and waited to see what was going to, whether some of those big deals were going to convert, but we might have gotten to the end of that road and found out none of them converted, which is often the case with enterprise sales. We had one customer who we were negotiating, and this was right during the first wave of like Trump tariffs against Canada. And they were a Canadian company, and we just came in one morning and the guy we were dealing with had been fired. This is a company that had paid us 6 figures already to like do some work with them. And then they just shut the whole thing down overnight and reorged. So, it's those cases where you're not losing deals to competitors or you're not losing deals because you built a bad product. You're just losing customers due to internal chaos at this company that's really hard to deal with. And I guess at every startup eventually ends up having to cater to that audience, but that as a starting place was just quite difficult for us, I think. And so this feels like it's back to our roots. We know how to talk to developers. It's a tool that we would use. We didn't have a mainframe. This wasn't a problem that we faced. And so maybe we struggled to empathize with that user. Like if I'd spent 10 years in a bank working on modernization, maybe I would have kind of approached that differently. But the perspective that I have as a developer now, allows me to build Vibe Kanban in a kind of authentic way. So yeah, some thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's because we've been thinking a lot about product market fit, and Jason Cohen, the guy that founded WP Engine and another one, he wrote this like really good article, and I think it's like a lot of it was about the obvious stuff you think in product market fit is like the pull, but he also talked about this like personal fit or personal
founder market fit.
Yeah. Is that something that, I mean, it sounds like that was a big part of this one.
Yeah, definitely. From a go-to-market perspective, low founder market fit on COBOL modernization. I would say the technology is there. If you are a bank listening to this and you want to convert your COBOL to Java, like you definitely can do that with off-the-shelf tools. It's a totally solvable problem. I think the problem that you have to solve is, what do I do with all these developers that I'm going to have to fire? And how do I do this in a way that is, risk-free, or nothing's risk-free, but in a way that is kind of satisfactory from a risk perspective? And then just, you have to fight the sales machine of these kind of legacy incumbent vendors who've been selling to your company for 40 years. So yeah, it's definitely kind of more founder market fit, I think, on that one. The business model would make sense, I think, if we had another vested interest in selling to those same companies, namely banks. So, for example, if you're AWS, you can do the modernization of somebody's mainframe, and then that company is on your system, and you can charge them for the next decades on EC2 instances, right? So it's great thing to do because you're getting workload out of a data center somewhere onto AWS. Or if you're Accenture, you can sell a bunch of transformation. Like, oh, well, we're going to do like workforce, whatever. And, we're going to, you look at it from the wider perspective of business transformation rather than just what's this kind of technology that we're trying to introduce here. So I think, yeah, it's founder market fit. Does it work for startups? But the technology's there ultimately.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's really cool now to see the whole journey that you've been on, and yeah. So what are you most excited about with Vibe Kanban over the next few months? I'll ask you because
yeah, we might all be dead in a year.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing I'm most excited about is when this stuff becomes multiplayer. I think very deeply about how there isn't really any good interface especially with coding, that kind of combines, the raw ingredients of like me and my team and coding agent and a great interface. And we've had some of our customers, or early customers, who've kind of forked Vibe Kanban and built interesting, mutations of what if 3 people could like work on the same conversation, but it's specifically about planning? Or what if, we kind of compartmentalize the work in a way where when Claude Code finishes running, it doesn't matter which developer picks that up. Like you just go to the pool of developers and whichever task lands gets matched with the next available developer. Kind of, I guess the Deliveroo or DoorDash for our American listeners, ification of coding, things like that.
Yeah.
Or the Mechanical Turk of
Yeah. Or like sales leads and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You just get, the auto dialer just starts dialing, which is maybe slightly depressing, but it's more the process of experimentation that I think I'm excited about with that
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay, that's cool. That's really cool. Okay, and then if you were giving one piece of advice to someone listening about the journey you've been on, someone that's someone that's in their first iteration, starting out, like, yeah, that hasn't been to startup university like you have now.
No. Well, hopefully you won't have to go to 5 years of startup university. I'm still in it. I'm a older student now. Well, just don't die. I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but really, like, we wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't have raised all that money in 2021 for the original idea that allowed us to stay alive. I mean, I'm very grateful to our investors who've been incredibly supportive and have backed us each pivot along the way. And, a lot of the original team are still here as well. And I think the reason why we've been able to kind of maintain that support from the staff and the investors, probably because we've been very open and quick to jump from one idea to the next. You got to put everything within an experimental framework. Okay, what are the success? I know it sounds simple, but like you need to kind of constantly remind yourself to just put everything within this framework of like, what would this look like if it was working? And then be ruthless if it's not working about cutting that and moving on to the next thing. And when you get to the point of where you're kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe this isn't working, just being very quick about, moving on to whatever that is. Because that's when companies die, when you have a team that is working for a long time on a product that everybody knows is dead. And it's just so demoralizing. And so, yeah, just getting that energy. I say to everyone, it's like, you can go and get a job anywhere. You're all very employable, but it is my job to kind of make sure that it's still interesting on Monday morning. And that's completely true. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And where can people learn more about Vibe Kanban?
Run MPX Vibe-Kanban and go through the beautifully designed onboarding process that has just been refactored.
Okay, nice. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thanks, Lou, for coming back.
Thanks for having me.